Try by.
Wow. Is this from, where is this from? Is this in my office?
It was outside your office.
It looks like, it looks like,
Yeah, it was outside your.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us for today's Philly Stat session. Today we'll be discussing Mayor Nutter's Goal 1, the safety of Philadelphia. Oh, can we start over, Willie? We're taping.
I thought this was live.
Taping. City Council sometimes interferes with our thing. He threw me off because he was playing a song. He can flip through that one.
Really? Great job. Oh, what a shot.
I don't think Joan took that photo.
I didn't take that.
You didn't personally take it? You didn't take it on you?
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for joining us for today's Philly Stat presentation. I'm Lila Alacresh, the Director of Performance Management and the Philly Stat Program for the City of Philadelphia. Today we'll be discussing Mayor's Goal 1, Philadelphia becomes one of the safest cities in America. We'll be focusing our discussion today on the Philadelphia's readiness to deal with all kinds of emergencies. To that end, we welcome members of the OEM, Office of Emergency Management Leadership Team with us. As usual, we'll be starting off with introductions to my right, and I'll turn it over to Mayor Nutter for some opening remarks and over to Sam Phillips, the Director, to lead us through today's discussion.
Lila, thank you very, very much. The safety of our citizens and people who happen to be in the city, tourists, visitors, other guests, there's virtually no other higher priority for a city government than to make sure that people are safe. And so the Office of Emergency Management plays a critical coordinating role across a variety of departments, at times maybe not as visible as the police department or the fire department or EMS, but I can assure the citizens that this is a 24/7 organization coordinating across a variety of departments and agencies and platforms, and not only with city departments, but also, of course, our very critical state and federal partners as well. And whether it's issues involving a building in the city, an unusual smell, severe weather events, all of those kinds of issues, and many, many more. Things that citizens at times may not even know about or hear about because they've prevented things from happening in many, many instances. This is a critical organization in the city government. Great leadership by Sam Phillips and her team, and so why don't we move forward? I know we have to do our introductions, but then let's just dive in.
Great. So I'm Jackie Linton. I am the Director of the Center of Excellence and Deputy Managing Director.
Lila Alacresh, Director of Performance Management.
John Curtis, Performance Management Analyst.
Jan Shabalowitz, Deputy Director for External Affairs, OEM.
Sam Phillips, Director of OEM.
Eric Iverson, Deputy Director for Planning here at OEM.
John Paul Bruno, Deputy Director for Operations for OEM.
Al Vittorio, Director of Human Resources.
Michael Resnick, Director of Public Safety.
Everett Gillison, Chief of Staff to Mayor Nutter.
Great. Good morning. Thanks for having us. We're thrilled to be here and talk about the work that we do. So what we're going to accomplish today is a little bit about who we are, our mission, our organizational structure, and our budget. Talk about what we do, goals and benchmarks. We have a division structure now in OEM, so we've done some internal reorganizing to build some opportunities for upward mobility and restructure ourselves, so we'll go into those projects. And then challenges and wrap up with what's on the horizon. So in sort of as a summary, executive summary, our major accomplishments are kind of threefold. One, we have recruited and developed a highly professional and competent cadre of employees. I mean, these are real superstars from, in many cases, around the country. Some of them are not from Philadelphia, which also has its challenges, but we've really brought in some great folks that are always impressing me. We focus on comprehensive and operationally sound planning. A lot of emergency management programs around the nation plan But we've really tried to take our plans and not have them sit on shelves. We turn them into training and exercises. They're evolving processes all the time. We really want them to be living documents. And then thirdly, we've really focused on some of our key resources and facilities. We've upgraded the city's emergency operations center. We have built a 24/7 watch command component. And we recently opened a warehouse. So we now have a emergency supply warehouse. We have a logistics operation that we're growing. And so those are real success stories.
Sam, talk about, you know, for people watching, listening, for the Office of Emergency Management to have a warehouse.
Yeah.
And for some, maybe not the most exciting thing in the universe, but we were just up there. What's in that warehouse, and why do you need that kind of facility? And then what gets deployed when situations occur?
Sure. So having a warehouse is incredibly important. One of the things that we do, and the mayor said this perfectly, we are largely invisible when it comes to public safety. It's police and fire who are really on the front lines. And we provide resources. We provide some coordination support. We're kind of the B team that comes in to help those agencies. And so having resources in the city in one location, we used to borrow steel closet space. It just wasn't an efficient use of storing all of our supplies and mobilizing them. It was cumbersome. And so we've built out a warehouse largely funded by Homeland Security grant funding. And it's everything. It's additional IT equipment, so we can deploy now IT Go kits to shelters. And residents, as an example, can get on the internet and start to think about some of their recovery processes, you know, communicate with loved ones. We do a lot of our shelter work electronically instead of paper forms. We have cots, we have meals ready to eat, MREs like the military has. We've also really gotten involved in making our city kind of wholly integrated with disability and functional and access needs. That is a real emerging issue in emergency management. Other cities such as Los Angeles, New York, even Washington, D.C. are facing lawsuits by members of the disability community who don't feel like their needs are being accounted for in emergency planning and response. So we have bought a lot of durable medical equipment. We have supplies that can retrofit our shelter locations, ramps and whatnot. We have assistive communication technology so that we can communicate with those who have been deaf and hard of hearing. So it's really everything. Generators, it's a whole complement.
I saw the generators. You have heating units, air conditioning units. I mean, you end up in some pretty significant emergency situations. And so one of the things I think is really important to communicate to the public is when you end up in these situations, the things that we take for granted, whether it's, you know, cool air in the summer, warm air in the winter, the ability to communicate, you know, everyone automatically assumes, oh, I'll just pull out my cell phone. Well, you know, you might be in a situation where either people don't have their phone because they were just evacuated from a situation, or communications may not be the best in the building that they've been relocated to. And so this ability to, I mean, those huge cases that I saw that are, you know, almost a phone company in a box is tremendously important. And people should know that we have that capability and can set up operations virtually on notice.
Yeah, and it's simple though. You know, it's even additional cell phone chargers. So we've really tried to just learn from past experience. Every time we activate a shelter or go to a fire, we do an after action. It is just part of our standard operating protocol. And so we capture all of those lessons learned, make some strategic purchases when there's funding available. And this was a long time in the making, but I think that's a sort of a sustainable approach to what we're trying to do.
Okay.
So just a few challenges before we jump into the meat of this. Certainly, you know, financial resources, we are heavily supported by grants, and the stability of those grants seems to be settling out, which is good news, but we never know. A lot of that is based on federal legislation, the 9/11 Act, the Homeland Security Act, Post-Katrina Emergency Management Reform Act. The placement within city organization is an item for note. Right now, it works, but as this administration comes to a close, at any given time, I report to at least 4 people, and it's working right now. It will be interesting to see how that works in January.
Well, it appears that you manage all 4 of them very well. They all do what you tell them to do, so you don't seem to be having much trouble in that regard.
And then lastly, just really thinking about how we continue to maintain and sustain our operations and sort of our surge capacity. FEMA has this quote, go early, go big, go quick. And so we're trying to be able to do the same. The warehouse is a great example, you know, going quick, going early, going big if we need to. But that's hard. We're 30 people in OEM, so, you know, but we do the best we can. So now getting into kind of who we are and what we do. So OEM's mission is we're responsible for ensuring the readiness for the city of Philadelphia for emergencies of any kind. I will say we've been doing some work internally on a strategic plan and strategic goals and objectives, and part of that has included a rewrite to our mission statement. So this is our mission statement today, but we will be adopting our strategic plan shortly, and our new mission, hot off the press, will be OEM focuses people, plans, and programs to promote a prepared and resilient Philadelphia. A little bit more concise. And we actually have a vision now, and our vision is to create a prepared and resilient Philadelphia. So just trying to be a little bit more succinct in our messaging. And we implement our mission through everything from public education, mitigation, planning, training exercises, and of course, response and recovery. So a little bit on how we're structured. The Office of Emergency Management, as I mentioned, is now based on divisions. 3 primary. We're on the brink of creating a 4th in finance and administration. And this is hugely important. For many years, OEM was a flat organization. It was literally everybody and then the director. And that doesn't give people room for upward mobility. There's no sort of focus around program area, cross-program collaboration. So we've done a lot to restructure ourselves internally. We did this, I think, by actually cutting our personnel budget a little bit. And so JP is in charge of our operations division. He has 4 program areas. Joan is in charge of external affairs, so everything social media, public information, emergency communications, and emergency messaging. And Eric has a huge portfolio in planning, everything from health and human services, homeland security, infrastructure, and training and exercises. And then, as I mentioned, our quasi 4th division is finance and admin. And we've tried to really pair like disciplines, find some efficiencies. I think health and medical is a great example of a program area. When you talk about human services and emergency management and providing shelter and providing recovery, you can't do that without also thinking about the health and medical needs of the community. So there's some nice integrative planning happening. Still have a way to go in that, but we're on a good track. What's interesting to note is in addition to that's what I would call our 9-to-5 org chart. We have a 24/7 org chart, and this is just where I really want to give credit to OEM's employees. Every single person on the office, in addition to their traditional 9-to-5 responsibilities, has a 24/7 on-call component. So we run 4 on-call teams. When I first started with the city back in 2007, it was 2. So it was 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. It was torture. So now we've tried to help people balance their personal lives a little bit better, have reduced the number of people per team, built out the teams. So you're on call for 2 weeks, off for 6 weeks. And each team is led by a team leader and an assistant team leader. We can run at least 2 incidents at a time, and deploy personnel to support police and fire activities. And then we have a rotating deputy on-call cadre too, Eric and JP, and they replace me when I'm unavailable or out of town or that kind of thing. Joan is sort of de facto always on call as our public information officer, but she has some reach back. And since OEM is not traditionally the lead agency, Joan is really a support person to fire department public information officer, water department public information officer, etc. So jumping into our budget, as I mentioned, we're largely supported by a variety of grant programs, typically all in the Homeland Security grant program space. So the big one is the Urban Area Security Initiative. This was created based on the Homeland Security Act after the September 11th terrorist attacks in 2001. This provides funding to the most at-risk jurisdictions in the United States. And the number of jurisdictions has ranged from 64 at the height to, what are we down to, 31 now, I think. So that's why the variability of funding is there, because these are all decisions made by Congress and the Secretary of Homeland Security and the President. There's a smaller initiative called the State Homeland Security Grant Program, in which a small pot of money is awarded to our state counterpart, the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency, and they have discretion how they want to divide that through the Commonwealth. That sometimes has been challenging too. Our state partners have used the theory of making other areas of the Commonwealth whole, so to speak. Since we get a lot of money through the urban area, they try to support the rest of the Commonwealth with the state grant. So some of that is, that changes on an annual basis. And then the third pot of money we get in grants is called the Emergency Management Performance Grant. And that augments just salaries for 4 people. And so we're heavily supported by grants. We will keep applying and researching grant opportunities. We actually recently won a very small grant to bring on a mitigation planner. So it's a small pre-disaster mitigation grant that will be starting momentarily. So our annual budget provided by the city ranges from, at the height, it was, I think, 486,000. At the low point, it was about 220,000. And the only reason why 15 looks grim is that the federal grants are actually behind the city grant process, the city budget process. So we will be receiving federal money in 15. We just haven't received those notices to proceed.
So Sam, how have these changes in the budget affected what you guys do every day?
So our first priority is, and I should also note that the Homeland Security Grant is not just a grant for OEM. It's a grant for OEM, police, fire, even some infrastructure projects in the water department, streets department, and it's a regional grant. So we actually work with the other 4 counties in southeastern Pennsylvania. So it's highly competitive, and there's a lot of variability, and our priority is to keep people. I think the most important thing we do in this business is have really great people who can adapt and who can write plans, and so that's, we will cut down to the point where that's maybe all we have. When we have other money, we build things like warehouses and new equipment for warehouses and try to modernize or do a really interesting training and exercise program. So we have kind of a baseline, how do we keep the lights on, so to speak, but then have some interesting things that we can do to become even more prepared, more resilient when funding is available. So going into what we do, after Hurricane Katrina, the city launched what's called the Emergency Preparedness Review Committee report. And this was multiple subcommittees were formed to look at what happened in the Gulf area of the United States, particularly in the city of New Orleans, and assessed whether that could happen here in Philadelphia. How prepared were we? And from that report, about 309 recommendations were developed. And I went through those recommendations in preparation for this, and we've, I would say, fully completed 178 of those, have about 74 that are partially complete, and 54 that remain incomplete, kind of untouched. The bulk of those pertain to issues of technology and communication, legislative and legal issues, finance and procurement, and then our ability to surge, how we would basically take non-OEM personnel and make them OEM personnel during a big disaster. Those are really tough issues to develop because of the complexity of, budget.
I'm sorry, for the 74 partially complete and the 54 incomplete, 74 partially complete, do you have a timeline laid out in terms of where those are and where you anticipate them to be complete? And do you think that all 74 will actually get done?
No, and actually a few examples would be, so one of the 74 is that OEM should have a mutual aid agreement with the Housing Authority, Philadelphia Housing Authority. I don't know if we need a mutual aid agreement with the Housing Authority. Instead, we've worked with them in a variety of capacities. We work with them when there are responses at their facilities. We know what their roles are and what our roles are. Joan has done a lot of work with them in training their residents and offering preparedness education. So it could be that in 2006, when that recommendation was developed, now in 2015, we don't need it because we've developed sort of other programs that fill that gap.
The only thing I would ask is, as I say, the only thing that's constant is change. And so,
Right.
People and personnel over time will change. And, whether or not, having an agreement, even if it was, particularly general, because you need room within any agreement to have the flexibility to do certain things. I mean, it's kind of one of those, is it better to just have it
Right.
than not have it? And, whatever the process and procedure is, because you're working so well together, I mean, it shouldn't
Let's
be difficult
formalize that, yeah.
to get one. And just so that, you know, the next wave of people, 5 years, 10 years down the road, know that there's something in place as opposed to wonder.
Yeah.
So, okay. And on the 54 incomplete, is that because some either are impossible to do, actually don't make any sense, or are there barriers to completion of those 54? I mean, you've got these 4 areas here, 3 of which I know certainly could be a challenge, and obviously a surge. I mean, that's just, you know, it's, again, people and capacity building, but technology and communications, always a challenge. Legislative and legal, always a challenge. Finance and procurement, sounds like money.
Right.
So what's the...
Well, money
sort of-
and process,
Yeah.
you know, just a few things that we've been trying to work with finance. For example, post-disaster, establishing disaster index codes so that our purchasing is better tracked. We can then apply for federal funding. So there are some smaller low-hanging fruit that we can fix, but some of these are challenging because they don't actually sit within OEM's responsibilities.
Right.
The EPRC looked at the city as a whole,
So
so the Emergency Preparedness Review Committee report looked at the city as a whole.
Right.
So it's really just kind of sometimes the bandwidth of other city agencies, how much we want to coax that along.
Right. Well, for our part, at least, let us know how we can be helpful to move some of this along. And again, I would encourage, and I'm sure you already have, but I mean, put them on a timeline of, you know, when they need to get done, who all is involved. I mean, we've seemingly developed a slight expertise in matrix making. And so, you know, this is what it is, this is what needs to happen, these are the people involved, and how do we move that along?
Okay.
Let's just sketch it out and have a checklist and keep going down that checklist, and then utilize us where you're having interagency
Okay.
issues. You might not be able to push the rock completely up the hill. Let us intervene and get people together.
Okay.
These things need to get done. So, and it looks like you're literally right at about 60% completion, but we need to, you know, lay out over the next year or two, you know, how do we get to 95, 96, 98% done? These things have to be done.
Okay.
And it's public safety, so.
Yep.
Right.
And then just a final note, Philadelphia OEM is probably one of the newest big city emergency management programs in the country.
Really?
Before this post-Katrina report was written, the office was about 4 people. So we've grown tremendously. We've become a
Who
national
did this
leader.
report? Was this an internal?
This was, by the former mayor.
Right, I understand. So
Yeah.
this was 05, 06?
6.
Yes.
Okay. And so you said
The office
before all of
was
this,
about
like
4
It was
people.
4 people.
And so the report really just kind of
wow.
brought OEM
All right.
'Cause that's
into
what we-
being in
we-
Philadelphia.
We recall it ended up, the former administration under Mayor Street hired Mary Ann
Right.
from New York,
Right.
came in, started doing stuff, and then we arrived.
Right.
And then we just started to really
Right.
get
Okay.
everybody together.
That's amazing. And where are other cities in this regard? In terms of having this kind of office and these kinds of programs and the size and all of that?
So there's a group called the Big City Emergency Managers. It's the 15 largest jurisdictions in the country. We have 40% of the population within those 15 cities.
Right.
And we are on par. As I said, you know, we're kind of the new kid on the block, but
Right.
we've quickly become a leader in that field. New York is
So another way of saying that is, so you're the star of the group?
No, not the star of the
No,
group.
no, that's what I hear from other people. I'm not
New
saying that
York-
you're saying that.
New York and DC are huge programs. DC is a smaller city, but the complexity of what's in DC.
Right.
Size-wise, you know, for the 5th largest city in the country, we're close to where we should be. The other, we don't pay people what the other cities pay people, but we're getting through that.
We usually don't.
Yeah, but we're getting through that.
We usually don't, unfortunately.
So,
Okay.
so moving on to our
I
divisions.
saw a lot of
Yeah.
heads nodding in the back.
Yeah. My reinforcements.
Absolutely.
So moving on to our divisions. First
Yeah.
up is planning, which Eric spearheads. And again, there are 4 program areas within planning.
Mhm.
Health and Human Services, Homeland Security, Infrastructure, Training Exercises.
Right.
And what you have here is, I wanted to give you both sort of the qualitative story of the division. These are just a snapshot of some of the projects that fit within those program areas.
Right.
And then the next slide is the quantitative. These are, the stats for each division.
Mhm.
And you can see that as the number of people in the planning division, for example, has increased, their work product is also increasing. I mean, they are pumping out plans
Yeah.
at an alarming rate, but doing really solid planning.
So I want to go back now that,
Sure.
from the previous conversation. So you guys, you all, I mean, you're essentially coming up on about almost about a 10th year anniversary
Mhm.
to some extent, 10, 11.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to page 5 for a second. An integrated and collaborative program designed around 5 tenets. I want to talk about at least 2 of them: public education and the training and exercises. So, I mean, I just wonder, as we talked in the opening, so Office of Emergency Management, I mean, term would probably go past many citizens. I mean, you kind of figure out the words, kind of what it's about. But, I mean, have you had, when we talk about public education, I mean, have you had a session where a bunch of citizens from different parts of the city were invited in to better understand what OEM is about, what you all do, walk them through some scenarios and those kinds of things, or even had, almost kind of a training exercise with a group of citizens or out in a neighborhood? If something were to happen, this is what we do, this is how it takes place. I mean, if we let the public, I mean, really kind of unmask you all and said, this is what this operation does, and you may not ever see us unless, a building burns down or there's an explosion or severe weather event, but we're here all the time. And these are the kinds of things that we do. Have we really kind of laid out to the public what this organization is about?
So what we do with the public, most importantly, is teach the public how they can be prepared.
Right.
So we hit every police district at least once a year, and we do other workshops sort of on request or if a new issue is arising. For example, we're meeting with the Center City residents. They want to talk about crude oil. So we will talk about crude oil, but we will also train them on how to be prepared. So I think we're doing a good job of helping people understand what OEM is and what it means for them. We're also very engaged on social media. We don't brief the public particularly on what we do, but it's in conjunction, it's sort of wrapped up in the larger conversation of here's what you need to be prepared, here's what it means for Philadelphia. This summer, we haven't done an exercise with the public. We always encourage them to sign up for Ready Notify PA, our text alert system. This summer, we're actually doing a full-scale decontamination exercise, and we're going to ask the public to be part of that. Show up on a hot summer day in your bathing suit and help us train, and then give us feedback. Like, what sort of concerned you with this process? Are you going to give us your fancy watch when you walk through decon, and we're going to need your wallet too. How do you feel about that? I mean, we really need to hear from the public so that we can write better plans and better prepare.
Right. Okay. All right, good. Sorry.
So planning by the numbers, plan updates are typically done annually or biennially, depending on what the topic is. We update most of our plans are functionally based, so they talk about mass casualty, for an example, not necessarily mass casualty by this particular incident, but the broad concept remains the same. The few exceptions, we do have hazard-based plans for our winter weather response and for severe weather, which is kind of the coastal storm, flooding, Hurricane Sandy scenario. We do new plans, so we're working on 15 new plans in 2015. We also build out incident action plans for major events and special events, so July 4th, Papal visit, Made in America, Army-Navy game, etc. And as you can see, the training activities are in the final column, and the height in 2013 was because of a robust training and exercise schedule that we had with some grant funding support. That's what I talked about, sort of the ebb and flow of the grant funding. But already in 2015, we've done 15 training exercises. We're going to be doing a mass casualty series this summer, so that will be a huge test of our plans before some really significant events here in the city.
Right.
The only thing I'd add is just what all these numbers mean at the end of the day, and the purpose behind all of our planning and all of these trainings and exercises is so that we can bring the full weight of city services to bear on these problems when they pop up, whenever they pop up, so we can deliver city services, not just from OEM, but from L&I and all the other agencies in the city family at the point of the incident to the people who are having a really bad day when we see them.
Where are we on COOP planning?
We are making good progress on COOP planning. So OEM inherited continuity of operations planning.
Yes.
It's our ability to restore critical government functions in an emergency. So we have been working with each department to develop a COOP plan. That's feeding into what will be a continuity of government plan. And we're giving Everett report cards every month on progress. And it's slow going, but we're getting there.
Before we leave, you know we will have something, right?
Yes. I
Just so
lie
that the
awake
mayor-
thinking about that every night.
Just so the mayor is aware, and I know that he knows he does not like surprises, but this is one that I'm going to surprise pretty much everybody.
Yeah.
And shut down most of the governments for services. And we have to see how we are going to react at that time and moment. So that's going to happen before January 4th, 2016. Just want to make sure.
So looking forward to it.
I know.
You and me both, sir. Moving on to operations, led by John Paul Bruno. 4 program areas in this group. And I would say operations is somewhat of a dumping ground. There's a lot of synergy in planning. Ops is just kind of the backbone, keeps OEM running, so it's IT, it's logistics. The EOC and the Regional Integration Center, that's our 24/7 watch command. And then also GIS, we do a lot of mapping and data analysis and data production, and that's a one-person shop, but Brian's doing incredible work. And some stats on our operations really pertain to responses and activation, and you can see just the wide variety of incidents that we've responded to. A lot of this is out of our control. I can't predict how many events OEM will need to get involved with each year, but it's everything from EOC activations to deployment of our mobile command post CP1 to the support we provide to special events. And you can see there's a nice uptick in the deployment of CP1, for example, in 2013 and 2014. And that's really, I think, other departments recognizing the value of having a place to coordinate and make some key decisions, and we're happy to provide that. We sometimes will deploy CP1 at our decision, but usually the first conversation we have when we arrive is to say to the fire commissioner or the on-call chief, you need it. Do you need the resource? What else do you need? How can we help you do this better? And then some stats on the Regional Integration Center, which is OEM's 24/7 watch command. We run 3 shifts a day, either an 8 to 4, 4 to midnight, and then the overnight, midnight to 8 a.m. It takes 6 people to staff something 24/7, so that's a lot of our personnel bandwidth right there. The Regional Integration Center opened in 2012, actually the very end of 2011 as sort of a pilot, and then was fully operational in 2012. They do everything from internal notifications to public messaging. They send out a daily situational awareness report that Mike and Everett and others receive at 7 a.m. every single day. It gives them a snapshot of what happened in the prior 24 hours, what the day looks like, everything from weather, special events, planned protest activities, ongoing incidents. We're still working out what's the best way, what data points and pieces of information people want to see, need to see. Far from perfect, but an evolving process. And interestingly enough, when we turned on the RIC, the Regional Integration Center, our deployments went down because we used to have to go to things to get eyes on it and better understand. And now we have the eyes. We have the 24/7 component there. And then finally, just a quick snapshot in operations on some of the equipment that is in our warehouse, and we've already covered a lot of this, but we have a backup mobile operations center, a mobile emergency operations center. We use that to build out a joint operations center for special events. It's actually now live at our warehouse. It's our COOP site. It's where we will go if we lose the EOC and we lose OEM. We have IT Go Kits, as I mentioned. Joan has done a lot of work building out a joint information center, which is where we will convene public information officers in the mayor's press office during an incident, and we have equipment to now do that. And again, everything from shelter assistance kits to cots to wheelchairs, walkers, meals, assistive communication technology. There's still more that we can do, but we're in a really good place for what we should be doing at a local level, knowing that when it's really bad, we can reach out to our state partners and then eventually our federal partners. So our final division is external affairs, Joan's shop, and the program areas are public education and outreach. These are our community preparedness workshops. We do trainings with with buildings. We do continuity of operations planning training with our private sector industry. We have a very large online presence, I think for an office of our size. We've done a really nice job on social media. Ed Vasallo, who's here, won us a Digital Distinction Award a few years back for innovation in social media. We maintain our website on our own. It's actually not on the city's platform right now because we need to be able to access it and change it 24/7. And that's all done in-house. We are moving, though, to WordPress with the change of philly.gov. So we're really excited about that. And again, we've done a lot of planning in public information on the development of a public information plan. How are we going to coordinate all of these agencies and get us on the same message during a crisis? Developing guidebooks and toolkits for people to be able to do that. And the sort of quantitative look at external affairs is our READY program. So it hits on our YouTube channel, it's our social media followers, Ready Notify PA. Number of times we've done targeted workshops and then focused on workshops with vulnerable populations, our business community, etc. We are really challenged when it comes to our Ready Notify PA public alert and warning system. I mean, in a city of more than 1.5 million, 36,000 subscribers is woefully insufficient, but it's free. I don't know how to crack that nut. And so we're trying to think about some new ways to sort of simplify that. We'll talk about this in future work, but we are moving actually to a new public alerting system. It's going to consolidate our external notification system and our internal RSAN system. It's going to be a messy transition. It's going to be a lot of work to move all that data over and make sense of the system. But what this new system will do is allow us to not only send text and email, it will give us voice capability, something that we don't have now. So I think a new system might actually breathe some new life into our public alerting. And then just our challenges, we've talked about many of these sort of high level, but financial resources, just being supported by competitive grants. There is variability. Again, we know what our priorities are. So as funding is reduced, we know where we have to cut back and make some critical decisions internally. And then when we're fortunate enough to find some other pots of grant money to do some really interesting and innovative projects. It means more exercises, it means more training, it means more workshops. And as Eric was alluding to, the planning we do, the training and the exercises we do, these are not OEM only projects. Everything we do touches another city agency and many times multiple city agencies. And not only in public safety. I mean, yes, we work very closely with police and fire, but we've been doing a lot of work with our partners on the infrastructure sector, so the water department, PECO, Veolia, our steam provider. We'd love to be doing more work with kind of our core city functions like HR and finance. And so all of this is not just about OEM, it's really about a prepared city. We're challenged with just-in-time purchasing during emergencies. We haven't really quite figured out how to do that. We know the mechanics are there. We just need to actually put together a plan, figure out how we would fund items, like it would be the equivalent of the the disaster relief fund, basically, and whether we should have,
But even in an emergency, you have restrictions
yes.
on purchasing?
Yeah, I mean, just the mechanics, who actually does it. And the challenge right now is that when we haven't seen an emergency where we've had to move to centralized procurement. Every department handles that separately. So there could be an issue at some point. That doesn't allow us to prioritize. So if streets department and the water department and L&I are all wanting generators, but let's say L&I generators are most important, they might be last on the list. And so we have to build a capacity for centralized procurement. How do we coordinate that and manage that out of the EOC? What's that decision tree look like? We haven't done that yet, but it's something that we'd love to work on.
Okay, but I mean, so do you have a plan for how to move that forward, or what changes would need to be made? From
Yeah,
a
we've had some
legal standpoint, or ordinance
We don't have
standpoint,
a-
or whatever needs to be changed. Do we have a game plan to move that forward to allow you all to get what you need to get in an emergency situation once an emergency has been declared? So, if an emergency is declared, these certain things, are a part of that, special powers and duties because of the nature of the emergency. So, I mean, it's not the everyday practice, but it's an
Right.
emergency practice.
We have a plan for how that needs to happen.
Okay.
We'll run into questions on, the most common question in government is, well, what index code is this going to? And I don't know the answer to that. We don't have an index code. So we just need to kind of create that emergency index code.
Right.
And actually the way we're moving this is by looking at our presidential disaster declarations
Right.
and proving by data that we're not recouping the amount that we could be recouping. We generally only get back 30% of our eligible expenses post-disaster.
Really?
Because we have poor record keeping, it's decentralized across departments. If we could centralize that and maybe tie it to when you declare a state of emergency, we then turn the switch on a centralized emergency procurement,
Right.
we could have better tracking.
All right, so give us a plan for that,
Okay.
process and procedure on who needs to do what.
Okay. And then Mike Resnick and I have had lots of conversations about the organizational structure within city government. Being within MDO we have a foot in public safety, a foot in MDO.
Deputy and I just had a separate conversation
Yeah.
about that.
My recommendation would be to make this a department, to make OEM a department.
What, are you reading my mind?
Yeah.
That's really scary stuff. I literally just
We
said
are-
that 3 minutes ago. Right, and we haven't had this conversation, so I'm very nervous. What am I thinking next?
Are you going to have a turkey sandwich for lunch? I don't know.
Probably not.
And then the last challenge is just employee turnover. The challenge with hiring really smart people is that you lose smart people. It's hard to retain them. But there's high demand out there. There's a competitive market for emergency management professionals. So we try to have a lot of fun, get as much work we can out of them in their 2 or 3 years that they're here. Some of us stay a lot longer. We drink the Kool-Aid and we just keep drinking the Kool-Aid. But it's great. There's tremendous work happening. And I guess at the end of the day, if we're helping people get on to that next great step, then kudos to us.
All right. Well, let's get some more Kool-Aid, but let's talk about the Emergency Management Accreditation Program.
Okay.
And how do people get on that path? Who pays for that? How do we support our folks? How do we, every area of the government needs additional support for professional development. And some departments, the training, of course, or the recertification, police, fire, it's required. A number of other agencies. Tell me about in this shop, and what is this program? How long does it take? How many people can go? Does everybody get a chance to go? Those kinds of things.
So I'll tee this up and then I'm going to hand it off to Eric. Emergency Management Accreditation is actually a city accreditation. So we are in hot pursuit of making the city of Philadelphia accredited
Right.
through the Emergency Management Program.
Okay.
There's tons of benchmarks that we are working through right now. There will actually be an in-camera or a desktop review of all of our planning work in early June. This accreditation body will come for an entire week, look at our portfolio of plans, training, exercises, everything we've done. So it's not so much that we would send people to this.
I understand.
But it you know, if we have people who have gone through incident command system training, all of that
Right.
is part
Well,
of this
I mean, I
process.
guess it's, and I didn't initially understand that it's us being accredited,
Yeah.
so I get that part. But I'm also always interested in how do we support professional development, skills building, certificates, that kind of training for our own personnel. How do we do that? What's involved, and how do we upgrade our entire? I mean, it's great that we hire really smart, bright people.
Right.
What else can we do to enhance their capacity, but also their career path going forward? I know that this is a highly competitive area, and it's a very narrow kind of space. There aren't that many people who do this.
Right.
And so that creates, I mean, it's just economics.
Right.
I mean, it's laws of economics. If you have, high demand and a few people who really do it, there's going to be a whole lot of pressure on those folks from a variety of places to get that talent. So I want the most talented people, and we need to support that talent. Obviously, we'd like you to stay for a while. But tell me about that process.
So I think the best way, there's not really great training, frankly, in emergency management. I mean, we could send people to national academies and have them do lots of FEMA training, but some of it's not really applicable to big city emergency management. So I think where we could really develop OEM personnel is by giving them opportunities to go and interface with their colleagues. So there are a few very good conferences. In fact, we have an employee that's presenting at the National Hurricane Conference this year on a project that we did at OEM.
Who is that?
Ryan Abbott, he's actually here. We built an in-house data manager which tracks debris, closed roads, everything you need to know. When you walk into the EOC next time, you're going to see a dashboard that gives you a look of how well your city is doing in a disaster. And Ryan built that in-house, and so he's going to go talk about that.
Congratulations.
So I think just having some funding to send people to those
Right.
sorts of opportunities.
Right.
I'm actually working with the other big cities to discuss maybe a big city exchange program. Could I send Eric to Los Angeles for
Right.
2 weeks?
Right.
And I'll take their version of Eric kind of thing.
Right.
So that's the type of, I know it can be done. I know it can be done.
I doubt that they have
I know.
an exact version, but we'll take whoever they send.
We'll take the next best thing. I think just having the resources to do that, I mean, we can identify where those meaningful opportunities are, and frankly, it's probably a smaller meeting or, even a trip to New York City for a day and a half to look at their facility and have some targeted meetings. That would be helpful, just the
Right.
budget and flexibility to do that. And I can't do that on the grant program.
Right, I understand. Okay.
We get a lot out of our liaison relationships with the other big cities.
Sure.
We have much more in common with them
Right.
than we do with a lot of the other counties in the Commonwealth, frankly. And we hire people who are critical thinkers. And so people are more interested in education than they are necessarily in additional training.
So, but you mentioned you can't necessarily do it on the grants that you get, but I guess the question is, and I mean, give me away from this particular Philly stat, but I mean, think about, is this a conversation though to have with Homeland Security, DHS in DC and Secretary Johnson, that they would actually support something like this because it's in their interest, it's in the big city's interest, and there should be a specific grant for this purpose
Yeah.
by them to pay for these kinds of things.
I had the opportunity to testify in front of the Homeland Security Advisory Council last week on the grant program, and they're
Okay.
looking for changes. And
Right.
my recommendation is, give us broad guidelines and let us operate within those guidelines.
Right.
The grant guidance is so tight right now. It doesn't, we're so worried about preparing for the audit and defending the audit
Right.
that we are spinning our wheels and not doing the things that are meaningful. And so they seem receptive. I think at some point we
Okay.
could welcome
Yeah.
your
Because,
help.
I mean, and many of the cities across the country are going to want to support that. So
Right.
that's when you start getting into, and what's the position of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and what's the position
Right.
of the National League of Cities, and what's the position of Pennsylvania Municipal League, and all these other leagues around the state. I mean, it just makes common sense, and we would want to support something like that. So if you, give me the basics of it, then, I mean, many of us played a very, very public role
Right.
in the whole discussion about the funding or non-funding of the Department of Homeland Security in the first place, and all of that, insanity in Washington, D.C. So, I mean, we've developed, I think, a pretty good relationship with them. And this really is a national issue, and we should be training people at home to do this work, and we can't always pay for it as local governments. But you want our folks to know their business when something happens. So,
Right.
you know, kind of help us out and send them to this kind of professional development.
And the other piece is there's a program called EMAC, the Emergency Management Assistance Compact, and that's actually a state-to-state agreement. But we were able to send 4 people during Hurricane Sandy to New York City, and we embedded them there for 2 weeks. And there's no better training than that. And so
That's
if
a
there
live
are,
incident.
yeah, and if there are opportunities to do that outside of the federal declaration process, you know, huge explosion in New York yesterday,
Yeah.
and I know some of that is challenging, but you know, and some of it deals with HR issues, how to deal with workers' comp, and a lot of those protections are built into this EMAC program. But we could really be creative on working some of that.
Let me know.
And then just, you know, I mentioned, so EMAP is a huge thing for this year.
Right.
We're migrating to this new internal, external communication system, and then certainly we play a role in coordinating big events now on the public safety side.
Yeah.
World Meeting of Families, the Democratic National Convention in 2016. And then just to sort of recap, OEM has made tremendous strides in planning and operational readiness. We have great people, really phenomenal people. And it's not about the 30 people that wear the OEM jackets. It's about really working with all of our partners, with the city, with the community. And then, you know, certainly there are opportunities to work smarter and find some of those efficiencies and cut through some of that red tape.
Good.
And Mayor, just
Great job.
as a reminder, one of the things that we are trying to make sure we accomplish before we get out is that relocating OEM to the new space,
Yeah.
I think is going to help both build capacity, build a way and sustain the
Yeah.
future. We call it a call center, but you and I both know it's
Right.
a lot more.
Sure.
But it gives us the ability,
Yeah.
I think, to be a big city by being in a better space, a space that would support the work that
Right.
they do 24/7 without having to kind of go all
Yeah.
over and do what we're doing now.
Well, we were talking about that earlier, I mean, but apparently the folks, or at least some of the folks at OEM, really do like the darkened cavern, you know, dungeon-like conditions that they presently have, and they would like you to replicate those. Where they would feel much more comfortable. Yeah, they're worried that exposure to the sunlight might, you know, cause them to, you know,
We're
flip
going to
out
need
or
a
something.
Ray-Ban budget.
Yeah, there you go. Maybe get a grant. Just, you know, for me, you know, kind of closing comments. I mean, while to much of the public, unless you're the public involved in a particular incident, OEM may not be as well known as some other organizations. Again, you have to, all of you know, I think, but we want to communicate to the public that this is a very, very important component of our overall emergency preparedness for all kinds of things, seen and unseen by the public, the planning that goes on, the 24/7 watch command, the ability to mobilize both, you know, personnel, equipment, and resources in a rapid fashion. And you know, as we kind of joke with each other, you know, in many instances, not seeing each other on the one hand often is a very good sign, but we love you all and we love seeing you, just not at disasters. So you know, you've done a tremendous job in building up this organization from, you know, what it was to where it is today. We still have work to do. This discussion about the level of the organization in the city government is an active conversation, and both your creation, where you are today and where you should be in the future, is something that will be of particular focus. In the course of this, I've sent a note to the solicitor's office asking for, you know, the documents around the creation. I think that raising the profile of the organization is good for the organization and is good for the public as well. So we're taking a look at that in real time. Keep doing a fantastic job, and hope to see you again, you know, only at a tabletop exercise as opposed to with our gear and outfits and unfortunate things that happen sometimes. But fantastic job, team.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
great work.
All right.
So,
Well, this concludes today's presentation. We encourage the public to continue the conversation with us via OEM's Twitter and Facebook accounts, as well as the Philly Stat Twitter and Facebook accounts. Next month, we'll be discussing Mayor's Goal 2, which is the education and health of Philadelphians improves, and we'll be having a discussion with the Free Library of Philadelphia. So enjoy your afternoon, and thank you again.
Thanks, Ken.